merit pay enters into some subjective areas where I'm thinking that instead of a merit pay raise that would stay forever, once it's given on that particular salary, that we might consider when we get to that point, and I don't think that the city manager is at that point yet, I think they're working on that we might consider a one-time bonus. In other words, if an employee has done something that's really exemplary, they've met a deadline that was very difficult, for example, like the Sheffield Park deadline that they met, and we could all see them working so hard on that, or if we had a city emergency where our emergency personnel came forward, just like a one-time thing that they could be given a substantial bonus for. That's where I would like to go, rather than a subjective merit paid. I'm just putting my opinion out there. So I don't know if any of you'd like to have any comments at this time, or if you want to save those for when the city manager comes forward with a more complete appraisal form.
Yeah, part of our discussion, my discussion with the mayor, was the appraisal form. This year, HR and I worked on the current one. I took several things out of it, and it's still not where I really am comfortable with it. I think she is not as well. So, once we get that, I will be bringing that back to you and asking you to add it to this policy. And the current one we use it across the board for all employees. So if you work in wastewater, you get the same one as someone as an admin. Of course, the supervisor has to look at different criteria. But also, as far as what the mayor mentioned about any kind of merit or a bonus, a lot of that will be handled by y'all in the process of budgeting, and so you can look at a lot of those things then.
Well, Mayor, I'd just add that's what I was actually about to say. Is I'm not opposed to the bonus by no stretch. It's just I think from a budget standpoint, it's a little harder to manage unless we just during the budget process we say we're going to set aside X amount of dollars for those. I like a merit, but what I really like is, especially for the department head, and I don't know how far down the line you can go, but I like goals. And you have these goals, these are my goals. If I meet these goals, then I get a bonus. Or if I meet these goals, then I get the merit pay. So we've had that discussion. That's just kind of the way I like to see it. So how we pay that out or how the city manager pays that out is up to him. But I like having goals and setting goals, and if they achieve those goals, that's just another way of evaluation. But my only concern with the bonus was if we can manage it properly through the budget.
And my concern is the same for merit pay. In other words, if we're not sure which department's going to give merit pay or if they're going to give merit pay, I just think we really need to iron that out before we say we're going to do that. And I think city manager's on board with that as well. So, is there other discussion or comments? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I agree with you completely on the sheet that the employees are going to sign, that they have read the new handbook, if you will. It's 100 and how many pages?
It's almost 200.
164.
164 pages long. And I think that, and I have to go back in time when I was getting these things and signing for them myself. It would take me a fair amount of time to read 165 pages. And I think it's only fair that it be pointed out by HR how important it is that they read it before they sign it. Which brings me to, and I know that I shared this with the city manager, I understand drugs, I understand alcohol abuse, and I understand that we have to watch out for city employees and the safety and so on and so forth. I understand also that we may have the right, and probably do, to search city vehicles, city property, city desks, and things of this nature. However, it just leaves me uneasy that we have it written in that policy, and this is why I think people need to read it before they hire on, that we can search your purse, we can search your backpack, we can search your car if you park it on city property. I don't know, I'm a little nervous that this could be a witch hunt at some point, and I'm not saying that we would ever do that. I'm just saying, is there anything in there to protect that from happening?
Well, they would never be searched unless, for me, that's in there if there's calls. And of course, we could never really go into someone's personal items unless there is calls to do that. For instance, if we, like the park, we brought some dogs in, canines, to look at bombs, look at different things. If that happened, that dog signaled on that car, we know we got something there on city property. I agree with you. It should not be a witch hunt, and that's not the intent. The intent is to make sure everybody stays safe and try to keep this a drug-free campus as much as we can. To answer your questions about what we're going to do on the policies, I'm going to pay the employees to sit down and read those. And we'll have HR here to answer questions, because I want to make sure that everyone understands all these policies to their degree. These are spelled out pretty black and white. However, everybody interprets things they read a little differently. So we're going to make sure that they do interpret them correctly.
And the only other thing I have to add is, and I say this with all respect to the city manager, if on almost every page of this policy or personnel handbook, it says at the bottom that you will administer, or possibly not, or have the luxury of maybe terminating, maybe not terminating, maybe applying the rule, or maybe not applying the rule. I go back to that old, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. How are you ever going to decide if you fire this person for dressing improperly or whatever? You're not going to fire somebody for that, but I doubt it anyway. But what keeps it fair? What keeps it fair if you can just...
Well, the way I look at it, I have 5 bosses, all of them up here. It's y'all's job to make sure that I'm fair and equitable across the board. With any organization, if you'll look, primarily the head of that organization is responsible given that task, because the employees do work for that person and not, a commission. So, I do in certain situations, and I have in the past in my career, if there's something that really bothers me and I'm having difficulty making a decision, I have asked former board of commissions that I served under, will help with some of it, but not in a public setting. It'd be more one-on-one that, hey, give me your thoughts before I make a educated decision about the situation.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may?
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Russell.
Just a couple of things. In relation to what Judy Tender, or Commissioner Tender, I apologize, said, there has to be some subjectivity to the policy. And an example would be that if he found an employee that had, and I hate to use the word joint, but had a joint on them, he may decide that employee is a good enough employee that he needs to go through drug rehab and he can maybe be saved. That same employee gets found with a pot of marijuana. Well, obviously now he's in distribution mode, and the city manager needs to fire him. So there has to be some subjectability about the rules. And that's just one example of a possible situation where you could find somebody with drugs and end up with completely different outcomes. So that's just my opinion on that. As far as the personnel manual, first I want to tell the city manager and his employees, thank you, because I know that I gave you 2 full pages of questions that I had, and I appreciate you doing the diligence to fix them and answer my questions. And the only question I would have after that is, what is your response from your department heads? Or what are they saying about this personnel manual? Are they happy with it? Or?
Part of the process going through this was when we was getting close to the end, I submitted a copy to all department heads. And, I wanted to communicate to them that I wanted them to go through this and look at a different standpoint, because a lot of the old personnel manual was so vague. And from an HR perspective, and our HR directors here, it's very hard to apply the rules across the board. So they gave us our feedback. We put that in consideration. We did have to change some stuff because, thinking of Matt and his police department, different hours. They work total different hours than the fire department versus, what Greg's guys work. So, there's a lot of input from them. So we believe it's been a well-rounded process using all department heads, including y'all, to sound this off of.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board about the personnel manual?
I do have one thing, Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner Barnes.
On the employee policy 146, excuse me,
What page is that, sir?
that will be on page 141. Under scope, the item number 1, where it talks about seriousness concerning or relating to financial reporting, things of that nature. The second sentence says, should the city manager be subject of the complaint, it should be reported to the mayor. I would like the commission to really consider that be changed to the city attorney, simply because the city attorney, and has nothing to do with Margot or anything, or Walt or whoever would be here. This will be something that the city attorney would need to step in at that point and give us direction as to what needs to be done from that point. So I would like to see that part changed to city attorney.
I would respectfully object to that and say that if that were reported to me, that the city attorney would probably be the first person I would contact to get advice. But if the city manager is the subject of the complaint, the city manager works directly for the city commission, not for the city attorney, who is also a consultant and an employee of the commission.
That is
So
correct.
I don't believe the city attorney should be given that authority. I think that if the city manager were the subject of the complaint, it would be reported to the mayor, at which time I would probably call a special commission meeting and ask for all of your input. Would that be?
I mean, I understand. I would respectfully disagree with that. I think it should come from the city attorney. The city attorney will inform the commission at that point in time.
But the city employee is not a figure of authority on this board, and Mr. White or whoever the city manager is works directly for this board, the mayor
Right.
and the commissioners, not the city attorney.
But at that point, we're possibly looking at some legal actions that we would need some direction.
And I think I just said that my first action would be to call a special meeting with the attorney present to go forward.
Okay, well, I'll still stand with what.
Okay, well, we disagree then.
Mayor, if I may?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
or if I,
The-
either one. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead,
I was
go
just
ahead,
gonna say-
Commissioner Friend.
Thank you, Mayor. How about a compromise here, and we put that language in there, that it goes, it's reported to the mayor, and the mayor will then call a commission meeting? Because I agree, it
I
needs to
have
be.
no problem with that.
Yeah, it needs to come, and I have full faith that you would do it. I'm just saying, maybe that's a compromise, that it does come before. I think it does need to come before the whole commission, because technically he reports to the entire
He does.
commission. Yes, ma'am.
So, I mean, I would immediately call the meeting, but I have no problem with that wording being put in if you have a doubt that I would do that.
Yeah. Of course, I don't have a doubt, for the record, that you would do it, but I just think for future,
And just let me reiterate, it's nothing against you.
I didn't take it that way at all.
But
I
I'm
just
saying.
reiterate that the
Well,
city
and it's-
attorney works for the commission.
Yeah,
He
I
is
agree with
not
that.
a person who's in charge.
I agree with that.
I think, thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Friend hit a nail on the head. I don't think it's anything to do with this commission, but who's to know what the commission's going to be like 15 years from now? We may have a mayor in here that doesn't do what they're supposed to do.
That's
You
exactly
know,
right.
so ultimately, I think that if you add some kind of wording, either add that the mayor will call the commission meeting, or add that it'll be reported to the mayor and the city attorney, or it'll be reported to the mayor and the assistant mayor, some kind of check and balance system in there.
I think that's what I just agreed to with Commissioner Friend.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, please.
I did have one concern about kind of the automatic calling of the meeting. There are times, especially in criminal matters, where you may not be encouraged by, say, attorney's office, the FBI, entities like that, to immediately call a public meeting. And
It wouldn't have to be public.
Executive.
You would contact the commission members and the attorney, and at that point, ask for advice if this would be a public meeting or if this would be something behind closed doors.
Or executive committee.
Yes. Do you disagree with that?
I'm not certain there's an exemption available from public meeting requirements for that, but I'm not positive.
So if I were to call a meeting of the commission and it's an emergency meeting, those by charter are not always required to have the 24-hour notice. And so at that point, we would get our advice from the attorney and go forward from there. I would think that would be protocol.
No, it wasn't a notice issue. It's the issue of having a closed meeting. Unless there's litigation pending, I'm not sure that we would have justification.
So what is your advice on this particular wording of this item?
As it stands right now, is acceptable to me, or it could say mayor and city attorney. I just, that automatic step of calling a meeting might not always work well.
Would the rest of the commission be amenable to the mayor and the city attorney? Is there any objection to that?
I don't think I'd object to that because then the city attorney could notify us.
Okay. Commissioner Barnes?
Yeah, I'm fine, just, we got to
Commissioner
have
Russell?
some guidance with it.
And Commissioner Tender?
Yep, that's
So
fine.
everybody would be good with that wording saying it should be reported to the mayor and the city attorney? So we can make that change?
I got it.
Okay?
And then,
Motion for that, or can we just make that?
well, we've got, I'm sorry, Mayor. I was going to make the suggestion that we've got 3 things to change now, so we probably need to re-motion the whole thing anyway.
I think it,
Well, okay.
4, yeah.
Okay, so we have 4 items. Thank you. Will those need to be motioned separately, or can we do those as a group?
they can all be together if someone is willing and ready to run through all 4 of those changes at the same time.
Okay, we will task the city manager with reminding us of what those are, and then we will ask for someone to make the motion, because the city manager cannot make a motion. But before we do that, do we have other, let's see if there are any other items. We may have more.
Well, do we need to rescind the first motion and second? Because we actually do have a motion and second on the floor.
We have a motion and a second to approve the manual, okay? But we haven't finished taking comments yet. So once we do that, then we'll rescind that motion and make the new one.
Perfect.
Are there any other changes or comments on any other pages that you would like to look at? Okay, then at this time, I would ask for the commissioner who made the motion to rescind that motion, and also the commissioner who made the second to rescind the second.
I'll rescind my second.
I'll rescind the motion.
Can we do that in order, please? Rescind the motion. I make a motion that you need to do it in order, the motion, then the second. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a motion to rescind the
Okay, and I'll make a motion to
Wait,
rescind the second.
I mean, I'm sorry, it has to be stated correctly. Commissioner Barnes, please.
I make a motion to rescind the motion that I made.
Thank you.
And I will rescind my second motion.
Thank you. Now we need our city manager he's going to call out for us exactly what we're going to be changing, and there will be no need to repeat it. If you'd like to repeat the motion, Commissioner Barnes, and say that I make the motion that we accept the changes as stated by the city manager.
I'll let one other commissioner.
Okay?
All right, page 41, change the wording on 4A. The first part of the sentence should read, a safety-sensitive employee. Page 108, in letter E, the word not should be removed. In letter G, the words 2 days of should be removed. The sentence will read, PTO usage is not required when sick time is pre-approved. And lastly, we will add to the end of letter I in scope, mayor and city attorney.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept the changes as stated by the city manager?
So move.
Is there a
Second.
second? There's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion by the board? Any discussion or questions from the public? Mr. White, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
Commissioner Russell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tender,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes, and so the city personnel policy is approved. Thank you, Mr. White, for all of your work and all of your staff's work in putting this together. Thank you.
Painful.
Item number 11, approval of the residential incentive program expansion. Is there a staff report on this item?
Yes, Ben, please.
Thank you, Mayor. You may recognize this incentive. We already have this residential incentive for the Lynn Haven CRA area. It was established a couple of years ago, and it runs extremely well. Property owners are receptive to this incentive, making a decision to build a new home on their vacant property. And that's the reason why I'm proposing to extend the area of this incentive to include the 1911 plat. Obviously, this area that is, the new area would be outside the CRA, and therefore this would be city residential incentive. And at this point, I would suggest, or I would recommend to approve this incentive as proposed, unless there are any questions from the City Commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Jonke from the Commission Board?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I clearly understand. Could you state what the incentive is if somebody chooses to build? And is this strictly on vacant property within the city?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and what is their incentive to do this?
There are two categories. It is if the property owner decides to build a new home on a residential vacant property, the property owner can get up to $2,500 for a home that has between 1,500 and 1,799 square feet of heated and cooled area, and $5,000 for a new residential home that is more than 1,800 square feet of heated and cooled area.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may,
Sure, go ahead.
how many, are you aware how many new homeowner permits were pulled in the last year in the 1911 plat?
Probably not.
I'm just wondering.
I'm not aware
I'm
of
just
it.
wondering how he came at the 25,000 fee, because I mean that could equate to only 10 houses. It's at 2,500 a house. So right.
25,000.
Well, I think, did I not read that it said the anticipated impact is 15,000 for the rest of this year and 25,000 next year? Did I not just read that?
15,000. Yes.
Right.
That's what I would. Propose. I've been looking at the inventory of vacant homes. So, and I counted about 100 vacant residential lots in that new area, and that was about the same amount of vacant lots that we had in the CRA a couple of years ago when we started this incentive program. There's a certain, it takes some time for this incentive to really kick off, because I have to do some advertising, I have to let the property owners know, here, this is available. They're not ready to start construction tomorrow. It will take some time for them to make that decision to build a new home. So probably for the remainder of this fiscal year, you probably won't be seeing a lot of applications.
Mayor, if I may, next
Go ahead.
question. The incentive, is it, and I guess the question is this, and I guess this is more for us than it is for Mr. Jenke. If a house is under construction right now and not completed and has not been issued a CO, can they not apply for the incentive?
No, this would be for a brand new project, so anything that's pending wouldn't be eligible.
And it says that in the application, that if
I
it's
think
already
so,
under
yes.
construction? And the reason I say that, Ben, is in my subdivision right now, there are 3 houses under construction and a 4th one fixed to start. So that's $10,000 right there in those 4 houses if they apply. Yeah, so obviously that's my concern, is I want to make sure that we understand where the money can go and how quick
Yes.
it can go.
My understanding, when Ben brought this to me, would be only homes after you approve this. Because anything that's already started is already started. That's the way I visualize it.
Okay, like I said, I just don't want any gray area like we had with the CRA. I want it to be it. There's no question when somebody comes before this commission, so.
And maybe
Other concerns or questions from the commission?
The purpose of this is to fill in all the vacant lots. That's the only,
to avoid urban sprawl.
okay?
An hour ago, we talked about avoiding urban sprawl, and this is one other tool that we could use to fill in vacant lots within the existing using the existing infrastructure. The road's already there, water and sewer is there. This lot was designed to, for residential use. Why can't we use it for that?
Thank you.
Are there other, go
Mayor,
ahead,
if I may.
Commissioner.
And just to clarify, you're here tonight as the ED director, not as the CRA director.
Yes, that's
Because
correct.
this money will come from the city of Lynn Haven and not from the CRA budget.
That is
correct?
correct, yes.
you.
Since this area is outside the CRA couldn't spend any money on projects like that.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for the questions. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yes, thank
Commissioner
you,
Friend?
Thank you, Mayor. I just can't say enough good things about this, Ben. I really appreciate you taking the initiative to go to the next level. We talked about this in the CRA, and I remember when we implemented it there. And the best thing about this particular incentive program is we have measured results. We have results where we took the incentive program, we put it into place, people took advantage of it, and we're seeing the return on investment because enough time has passed. And I think we'll see the same thing with this. So I appreciate you taking the work and doing it and expanding the area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from the commission? Oh, Nick, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there's a requirement that the certificate of occupancy has to be issued prior to the end of the fiscal year, and with a lot of homes taking 8, 10, 12 months to build, do you foresee any timing issues where if you're, say, halfway through the fiscal year, you won't be able to achieve that completion?
I mean, 12 months is somewhat unusual. Usually when the contractor starts construction, they won't sit on the house because the interest clock is ticking for them. So they are, the longer they wait or the longer they postpone the finishing the construction of the home, the more expensive it gets for them. So looking at the previous projects that we permitted under the CRA residential incentive, it takes about 3 to 4 months to complete a home. And it's simply a process of, to the latter part of the fiscal year, just to let the property owner know the fiscal year ends in, let's say, 2 months. You may want to wait with your application until October 1 to officially submit your application, and most of the property owners understand.
Mayor, if I may?
Sure.
But if they've already, so that means that they've got to wait 2 months before they can start construction, right? Because the application has to be the application has to be put in before they ask for the permit to start the construction. So that could actually slow their construction process down.
No, the application doesn't, the submittal of the application doesn't have to happen at the same time whenever they start construction. It's,
So that goes back to my original question. If they can submit the application after they've already been issued a building permit, then we need to make sure that in this motion that any houses that are under construction right now don't fit into this. Otherwise, if we pass this as it stands, any house that's into construction right now that hasn't been issued a CO can therefore ask for this money.
I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he was saying something different from what you're saying.
Okay, then I guess I need to be corrected or clarified.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I heard something different.
to start the incentive, and this could be part of the motion, that this incentive will be approved effective today for any new construction as of today. And that would mean that all the projects that are currently under construction would not qualify. We have to pick a starting point somewhere, and that's something what I would recommend.
But in the future, they could start construction and then apply for it.
Yes.
Okay, that's, all right, so I'm on the right page then.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's what I was hearing too, so we're. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, are there any questions from the public? Mr. Walker?
Rich Walker, 1106 Michigan Avenue. I agree on when the CRA started this, but the validation of the input of data is not really that way. according to tax people, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to recoup that money that you're doing with the incentive, and that is a documented thing. To increase the CRA area in its development of the revitalization, or what you call this program, you passed a law that you took the old area's CRA. If you had enough area, you could build 2 houses on the old plats. There's not that much construction going on in the old CRA because of that. But to get back to this point, in the CRA, I asked a long time ago if there was a cap on the amount of houses that you could do. I was told there is. I cannot find it in the program. I cannot find it in this program. If you're saying that we're going to allow them to get 5,000, I don't see a cap of how many houses the developer can do. For example, in this, right across the street from me right now, I have a developer putting in 2 houses on 1 lot. And I don't know if he's going to apply for CRA. He might. But can he? Can he do that in your new program? My question is this. I didn't see a cap on your enlargement of that program. Is there a cap?
There is an amount of money that he presented, $15,000 for the remainder of this fiscal year and $25,000 for the next. I would assume that's what you're asking.
Thank you. I understand that, but that's not the cap I'm looking at.
Okay.
How many houses can a developer build in 1 year under your program at 5,000 or 2,500 a clip? Can a developer who owns a piece of property?
Well, you use the word developer, but someone who builds 2 or 3 houses or 4 houses is not necessarily a developer in the terms that you're using it, I don't believe.
Yeah, but a developer buys a piece of property.
I know what you're getting at because you brought it up before with CRA.
Right, okay.
So
all right.
I hear where you're
I'm talking about this program here now. If a person, my next door neighbor, he bought a piece of property. How many houses can he build on that piece of property? Maybe 5, okay? He then turns in to be the guy that builds them. He owns the property, he submits the application, he
Thank
builds 5 houses. That's what I'm looking at
Okay.
the cap. Is that in this program?
Okay, I'll let Mr. Jonke respond. I don't see it.
If you take a look at this map that shows the inventory of vacant lots in the area, the expansion area, you will notice those are all individual lots. And there's maybe 1, maybe 2 properties that could possibly fit, potentially fit 4 homes on it. But we don't have the space anymore to build large-size subdivisions in the downtown area. That's why developers look for larger properties down Highway 390 or up Highway 77.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I think the point's well taken. How many can an individual, how many times can that individual make application? I think it's a valid point. My answer would be, I want you to do it as often as you possibly can. Because let's don't overlook the purpose. The purpose of the Residential Development Incentive Program is designed to promote the development of unimproved lots within the city. So I don't care if it's 1 individual or 10. That's my point.
Just wanted to see it proceed.
Mayor,
Okay, yes.
thinking the same thing, Commissioner Friend. I mean, the whole purpose is to increase property taxes, obviously. So it doesn't matter if one builder builds 20 houses, you're still increasing the property value, whether it's an individual builder building each one of them. That's not my concern. I will note that the 15,000 and 25,000 are anticipated estimates. Unless we put it in a motion, there's no cap on this as far as monetary amounts. So we need to consider that when we make the motion. The other question I would have is the property that comes to mind with me is the Ireland property at the end of Iowa. That's 16 acres, I think, with one house on it. If that property, and that is in the 1911 plat, if that property is bought, tore down, and subdivided, you would end up with, if I had to guess, I would say if it's 15 acres, that's what, 60 lots? So that could potentially be 60 houses built there, that could be a substantial cost to the city, at $2,500 a house. So, that's my only concern. I worry about big developments, and I know there's not very many of them, but I live next to the Ireland property, and I'm telling you, I'd buy it in a heartbeat if I could, but the lady's not selling it. So it's not something that's going to be an issue anytime soon. But that is a possibility that we need to consider.
Yep. Mayor, if I could.
Please go ahead.
Just to follow up, and I certainly respect your position. I would just remind us that we approve each of these applications as they come, and then normally when they're presented during the CRA, they're presented with this is what we have, this is what we have left. So we would have a record as where we are, with how much money we have before we approve each application.
And my only answer to that would be that's where you get into the gray area. Somebody submits an application, they're expecting something, and if that application says that I've done this, this, and this, I should get my $2,500, and it becomes a subjective answer for this commission to say, no, you're not getting it. It's not fair to a citizen to do that. If you've done it for this guy because the paperwork says it, you need to do it for this guy because the paperwork says it.
Applications, sorry,
Go ahead.
we're just having fun.
That's okay, go ahead.
Applications are submitted for approval or decline. I mean, that's the purpose of an application.
Okay, then that's a fight we're going to have when we decline.
I know it. That's going to be good. Thank you.
I have a comment.
Please go ahead.
I do agree there shouldn't really be any subjectivity. Mr. Jenkins set this up, so there doesn't need to be. But it does have a finite amount of money, and what I'm wondering is if, I'm not familiar with the CRA's budgeting process. Has this already been budgeted? Is it consistent with what we have currently budgeted, or do we need to take the step to budget these funds through the CRA, and that would alleviate some of these concerns?
You said there's a set amount of money?
It's $25,000.
No, it says right here, approximate. Next year is approximate 25. These are all anticipated estimates.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. I think the intent is to budget a certain amount of money. I'm not familiar with the CRA's budgeting process.
Well, this actually falls outside the CRA. This would come from the city budget.
Okay,
Because this property's outside the CRA.
if we could go back to, I think Mr. Jonke wants to bring some information to us. Please go ahead.
Well, I penciled in $15,000 for the mid-year budget amendment for this incentive. City manager hasn't said no yet, so
I'm waiting on them.
so that's what I'm proposing. If you approve this today, we could start as early as whenever the mid-year budget amendment has been approved with this incentive.
So in other words, what I'm hearing Mr. Jonke say is he can't put a finite amount of money on it until he knows if we're going to go forward with it, and then the city manager budgets for it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we need probably, if we are in the mode of going forward with this, we need a more definitive motion based on, yes, we approve this idea, pending what's available in the budget and what the finite amount should become. Does that?
How
So move.
Well, somebody's going to have to rescind that first motion and second, and I don't think we've even done that yet. We just had the report, so we're good.
My suggestion, Mayor, would be instead of going at a finite amount of money, say that you're only going to do it for the first 15 applicants. Limit the number of houses per year. That's just a suggestion, because my fear is you're going to have 50 of them the first year.
Well, if you say you're only going to have 15 applicants, then you've just reworded how much money you're going to allow.
Oh, I know.
It would mean the same.
But then you've got a cap. Right now, you have no cap as to how much money the city can end up spending on this, short of the commission saying no, and then you've upset a citizen because you've told them in the paperwork that
Leave
yes.
that to them.
No more than you're going to upset applicant number 16. So that 15 is subjective as well.
So why not consider the 68 homes that you're talking about down there in Iowa, or Ohio, or whatever it is, and cap it out at the top of that. We know there aren't any other developments that are ever going to use it. That's a lot of money, but, I mean, you've either got to set a limit. And I tend to agree with Commissioner Russell. I don't know how we would have an argument on our hands if we deny one and allow the next, or allow one and deny the next. If we're going to do it, we should either cap it out with the knowledge that the possibility could happen down there at that street.
Then I would charge the commission that someone should make a motion of what you believe this, how this should be stated, how we should go forward, and see if your motion gets a second.
I would make a motion that we approve the ED director's proposal with the condition that it be limited out at 15 houses per year. And if it goes above that, then it comes back to the commission to address it if necessary.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second that we would cap this at the number of 15 houses. Is that what you said, Commissioner Russell?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then if someone came beyond that, that it would have to come before the commission for approval. Is there discussion or comments on that?
Is 15 houses per year.
Per year. Thank you.
So we're basically going to limit building to 15 houses a year in the city,
You're not limiting the number of houses that can be built. You're limiting the number of houses that can apply and get this incentive.
which in essence would probably do that. But
Well, as right now, they're not getting anything. And according to what I'm being told, the city's at a continual growth right now, that our permits are increasing every month now. So it's not that we're hurting them, we're incentivizing them for more people to build. There's a motion and a second. I mean, it's up for discussion. If you've got a better idea, I'll be glad to rescind my motion if you come up with a better idea.
I just want to make sure I understood your motion.
Well, Mayor, if I may,
Friend, go ahead.
thank you, Mayor. I want to make sure also, I think I heard in there in the motion that they wouldn't come before us for approval. The 15, I think I mean, I don't know. I like them coming to us before the commission for approval is presented. So I like budgeting for them. I like the way it was presented, so I'll just leave it at that for now.
I don't have a problem with the way it's presented, other than the fact that you can't budget for it because you have no idea how many you're going to get.
Well, the way it's presented is he's got 15 for the remainder of this year, and then that's anticipating 15 for the remainder of the year. When we get to the mid-year budget, we actually put a number on it after the city manager and the ED director decide what the number needs to be. Once we approve the mid-year budget, then we know what the amount's going to be, and then then we take applications as they come.
Once the board finishes the discussion, then I'll allow public discussion. Thank you.
Question I had that I think
Go ahead, Nick.
Mr. Jenke already answered was, will this require a budget amendment to begin doing? And I think he said yes.
Yes, that's what I said.
So we're not immediately starting anything until that budget amendment occurs, and that would address some of this concern about making sure we have enough money available.
Okay, so then I misunderstood. I thought if we made the motion tonight, somebody could apply for this tomorrow and get the money. That's not the case. Until the budget is corrected, we're not going to be able to incentivize this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
Then I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second.
So clarification, again, before another motion is made. The clarification would be that if the commission approves your proposal this evening, we are only approving the concept of expanding what we've been doing in the CRA to the 1911 plat. And that once this notion is approved, then the city manager and our EDA director will come up with a budget amount, and then that will be the amount which will be offered to those who apply. But if we approve it today, we have drawn the line today that any of the houses that started before today would not be included in the application process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you would add to my comments?
I would just say it's that this motion would be contingent upon budget amendment approval or sufficient funds in the amended budget.
Okay.
Okay, so let me understand this. So when will this money be available if we approve?
July.
whenever the mid-year budget is.
July or October 1st.
No, it'd be mid-year, because
Which is-
he and I discussed this, it'd be something we would want to roll out before the end of this fiscal year. So that was the reason he split the dollars, to kind of give you an idea of what he would, if we could do it today, what we'd be looking at around the 15,000, and then the other money would be what would be budgeted in fiscal year 2019, 18-19.
Which would be October 1st.
Yes, sir. But my intention would be bringing the mid-year budget to you, soon.
Now I believe are there other questions from the board? You all look weary. Are there questions from the public? I believe there was one right here. Yes.
Gloria Cutchins, 1115 Kentucky Avenue. I can understand the incentive program when development was very slow, but Commissioner Russell just pointed out that you keep getting applications constantly. Why is it necessary to have an incentive program at this point?
Okay, thank you for that question. Ben, would you like to respond? And then I'll get with Ms. Tennell next.
I think that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. Right now is a time where a lot of contractors a lot of property owners are willing to make an investment. And this incentive is an encouragement for those property owners to look to make this decision to build a home in their future home in the downtown area of Lynn Haven. $5,000 is a lot of money, and if a property owner has maybe 2 sites available, he may decide to go with the Lynn Haven side and invest the $250,000 home in Lynn Haven versus another site that is maybe in another community or in an unincorporated area.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tennell?
Libby Tennell, 505 Virginia Avenue. Listen, I don't see why the citizens in Lynn Haven want to spend this money. People want to come to Lynn Haven, and this money wouldn't help them make their mind up. I mean, we built a house here several years ago, and nobody gave us money because we wanted to come to Lynn Haven. And I think this is a foolish thing for y'all to do because you're taking money out of the citizens' pockets, and we need to put it in something else. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
One point, and I think I thought I heard you say CRA. This has nothing to do with the CRA. I would like that to be really put in there.
I don't believe I said it did, Mr. Walker.
I thought I overheard the word CRA there.
Not from me.
And okay,
I made that
if I
mistake.
did,
was incorrect.
what?
I made that mistake. I was incorrect.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I just want to clarify, this has nothing to do with the CRA and
I
CRA
understand the
program.
difference between the Plat 1911 and CRA, I promise.
Another statement that was made, there are 100 lots. They are individual lots, okay? That doesn't stop a person from buying all those 100 lots.
Right.
Agreed. That's being done. Thank you. Yes, Brad?
Brad Yunt, 210 Lakeview Terrace. I'd like to remind the commission that each home that gets built actually costs the city money on an ongoing basis. The tax revenues raised from a home do not cover the costs of the services rendered to the residents of that home. If you want to make a profit on construction, you encourage commercial properties and industrial properties. Encouraging residential properties is actually taking money out of your pocket on an ongoing basis. Why incent it?
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions from the public? Anything else from the board?
Can we restate the motion one more time?
Well,
I
we
don't
don't
believe
have-
we
we
have
don't
a
have
motion yet. We're still trying to clarify where we're going with the motion.
Ready.
It may be that I would just lead you in this direction. There might be a motion that we give this some more time before we go forward with it. Maybe think about it until the next meeting and think about it then. So I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe someone else has a motion they'd like to put forward other than that.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward as presented with the understanding that the applicants wouldn't take place until after today and after it's reviewed and budgeted for in the mid-year budget review.
There's been a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
So there has been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion of Commissioner Friend's motion? I think we've heard from the public. Is there anyone who didn't speak? I don't want to leave anyone out. Mr. White, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
Commissioner Russell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tender,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes. So we will approve it as stated at this point, and then we will get more information as we move along. Item number 12 is approval to add an addendum to the cemetery and lawn care contract with the Greenleaf Lawn Care of Bay County.
Yes, Mayor. To make sure you understand, the cemetery and lawn care contract is the title of the contract that we have with Greenleaf that does a lot of our extra mowing and lawn care needs within the city. Something that's come up, and as you start seeing the grass grow, we're starting to see weeds grow into a lot of the areas that we have around City Hall. So you can see City Hall, the police, and the chambers. The medical building refers to the old, where we're going to be having the service center, of course, the library, the sports complex, and Kane Griffin Ball Field, a little bit more, and of course Sheffield Park. The chemical program that we have agreed to try to look at with Greenleaf also includes herbicides, pesticides, fertilizing, and also seeding in the winter months, especially for the baseball fields. I don't know if you've had a chance to go out to the baseball fields lately, but it looks like a clover field because they have not been taken care of in the past, and we need to really get those up to par. So when we did the contract, we asked the contractors to also give us some a la carte services, and this is was in their contract, and would just need your approval to add it to their monthly contract with the city.
Thank you, Mr. White. Is there a motion to approve the addendum?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion from the commission or questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Tender.
How much additional cost does this come to the city?
In the packet, it would be
Item 12.
item 12, which would be at a very different cost. Like City Hall would be a $35 cost. Police chambers would be $48. The medical building would add $35 a month. The library is $64. Sports complex, which you have seven ball fields. Is that correct, David? $2,664. Kane Griffin, $656, and Sheffield Park would be $616 a month.
Are there other questions?
Yes, Mayor.
I just want to, I just have to.
I don't have a total.
He was showing me, I was reading as
Okay.
you were
I'm sorry.
going.
I'm sorry.
These figures are per month?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That'd be for the application and also chemical.
I'm getting to like clover.
Mayor, if I may, just a couple of quick questions.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Russell.
This, in addition, and I think I heard you say it, in addition to the fertilizer and the weed killer, it also takes care of the chintz bugs, mole crickets and stuff like that, that are what kill the grass out there at the ballpark, which are highly important to get rid of them. But my question is this, the chemicals that are used, are they going to be kid-friendly? I mean, are we going to have to close the park, when they spray?
The application process will happen when there will be no kids at the park.
So middle of the night?
Not middle. Like for instance, Wednesdays, we have no kids. We'll have no.
But the fields are still open for people to use. They can go out and use the fields, so you're going to have to close the field.
Close a lot of them, and a lot of this, I can check and make sure it is kid-friendly.
And then the question, obviously, with what's going on with Sheffield Park, which is a testament to you and your employees, because every time I drive by that park, there's tons of kids out there at the playground all the time. And I mean, I love seeing it. but that is the possibility we're going to shut the park down when we treat it?
I will have to check on that.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to voice my concern that the city manager and I had already talked about in the past, and I wanted to give him the opportunity to share his thoughts with what he has shared with me. And my concern is it is some legitimate cost. And speaking of the mid-year budget, I'd talked to him about maybe holding off until the mid-year budget so that we can see where we're at, which is just right around the corner, because this is significant cost. But I do recognize the need that we need for this, and the parks are looking fantastic, and we certainly want to keep Sheffield Park looking as good as it does today. So he had mentioned to me that he's working on some offsetting, some things to offset this cost. So.
Yeah, and that's some of the things I mentioned earlier, you know, some of the other sports we're bringing to the complex. I know the biggest one is the complexes, and it's just so much square footage of grass. But you know, we're looking at bringing kickball, softball, other summer drop-in programs, which all these dollars that we take in will go back towards community services and try to offset those. The biggest thing on a lot of this, especially around you know, the park and here on site, we're at the point that the grass needs fertilized.
Right.
So, you know, if we're going to do it or have a systematic program where if we start seeing weeds once they get them out. Now, I will tell you this, sports complex, you will not see, it'll take a little while before this takes effect, because it takes a while because you start looking at killing certain invasive plants, because you go out there and kill everything, it's, you know, the park's going to look bad.
Yeah.
So there's several steps to this.
Are there other questions or concerns?
I just want to ask one question.
Go
Do we,
ahead.
by any chance, this would be an additional $4,800, almost $50,000 a year. What are we? Do you have the figures of what we're paying now to this lawn service a year?
No, ma'am. That would be, you know, what y'all approved prior.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, so that would be in another, we still have a copy of it with us to know the
You know,
amount?
and also I've neglected one thing. That would be them cutting the baseball fields.
Uh-huh.
Because a lot of what happens today, our lawnmowers are on the outside. They're in the ditches. They're continually bringing weeds in. This will be actually real cut. Is that correct, David? So when you real cut these fields, they'll be real cut twice. So you actually have to mow the field twice. And, you know, it'll be done with machines that will not be in the ditches, keep bringing all this invasive plant life to the ballpark.
So are you saying that cutting charge is not included here? Is that going to be
It
added
is
on?
included.
It is
Yes.
included.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Oh, that's a big difference. Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I do apologize.
Are there other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? We've had a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Mr. White, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Russell,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
Commissioner Tender,
No.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes. Motion is approved. Moving on to item number 13, is the approval to convert Kensall Baseball Field to a dog park. And is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion for approval and a second. Are there any questions or discussion? Any questions or discussion from the public? Mr. White, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
excuse me, Commissioner Russell,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Tender,
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes. And I just want to say how delighted I am about that. That's one of the main requests that I have probably once a week on my social media, is for a place for people to take their dogs in Lynn Haven, and I think that's going to just be great. So, item number 14, approval to move the splash pad, one of the splash pads from the sports complex to Kane Griffin Park. City Manager, a report on that one?
Yes, ma'am. I'm bringing this back to you in consideration to think about. I've spoken to some citizens, and actually a citizen brought it to my attention, and we've done a little bit more homework, and Greg here is in the audience tonight to help with this a little bit. Done a lot of research on splash pads. Greg and his guys does all our utilities, so he's over the water and wastewater treatment. So naturally, this more or less fall under his guys' realm of work to make sure the water, is balanced correctly at these splash pads. He did bring one thing to me, which is a little concern, but it's not that big of one. It's one we could overlook if we needed to. Is the splash pad at Kensaw is on City of Lynn Haven's water source, and the splash pad at if you move it to the sports complex will be on actual Bay County's water source. That don't bother me as much as a couple more things we found out from the city of Panama City. They had two things that they told us that we needed to stay away from. One of them was trees, because it gets in the leaves get in the filtration process so bad, and the other was dirt. And then, with the citizen mentioned what he mentioned to me, which I would like to paint this picture. Kids get through with baseball. I don't know if you've been out to the baseball park. We have 750-something kids playing ball. I can imagine a lot of them are hot and tired, especially when it gets a little bit warmer. They're running in there, getting in the splash pad with clay all over their clothes. The next thing I know is they're getting in mom and dad's car with that wet baseball uniform on. And what's left is remnants of a lot of clay in their system. These are going to cost in a neighborhood of probably, our estimates was it $600 to $1,000 a month, depending on what we had to do. So that's what to operate these things, and that's us utilizing a lot of our inside people. But I wanted to make sure y'all understood this, that it could increase stuff. Ken Griffin, I did look at that park. I do have a good place to put it. There is one baseball field over there. However, it's typically the older kids that utilize that field, so they would not be utilizing the splash park. Other than that, North Bay Haven utilizes that. So I have no problem putting it either place, but after my meeting with my staff, I thought it'd be prudent to bring it back before y'all to really think about.
Thank you. Any comments, discussion, motions?
Mayor, if I would, I like the idea. I like the idea at the rec center as well. But the advantage to being at Ken Griffin is you've got a clientele that can walk to the park. You don't see people walking to the rec center. So I think more kids are going to utilize this park at Ken Griffin personally.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. I disagree. I've always, since 2011, have mentioned that a splash pad in Lynn Haven, if the residents are going to pay for it, I think we need to put it in a location where it's going to get the most use. And with all the activity that we have at the sports complex, I think that splash pad is going to get the most use. I can certainly understand and respect the staff's concerns. I think we can overcome some of those concerns. Maybe a shower before you enter the splash pad. As far as them getting into vehicles, that's a parenting issue. We can't control any of that. We mentioned, or Mr. Leon Miller mentioned, that Ken Griffin, in the future, I'd love to have a splash pad there in the future, maybe at next year's budget. In fact, I'd go on record tonight and suggest that if he would be willing, we could name it after him. In fact, he's a great asset to our community. But anyway, I just can't say enough that I just think that the sports complex, I just think if we're utilizing taxpayer dollars, that we need to put it at a location where it's going to be utilized the most. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yes, Mayor. I totally agree with Commissioner Russell. I think it would be a great place to have it, Ken Griffin. I think the kids there, I think there would just be tons of children there that could walk to that park. And I think it would be used immensely. One of the concerns that I had when we first talked about putting it at the sports park, as a parent, I can see Bobby, who's 7, playing ball, and I have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old over here, and I'm making them watch him play ball, and they're screaming, I want to go to the splash park. I think it could just, to me, I'd leave the 2 little ones home so I didn't have to deal with it. But I think it would be much more beneficial at King Griffin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm sorry, just one more comment. I would just remind us that we've already approved for it to be at the sports complex. And I get asked all the time, they see the news or they see the social media that the other one's already started, and I was asked just Saturday, when's the one at sports complex going to take place? So I think if the commission decides to move forward with moving the splash pad from one location to the next, we need to give a little bit more public notice. I think we're going to have some really upset residents. They're expecting it to be at the sports complex. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other comments from the commission?
I have a question for the city manager.
Go ahead.
Would an approval tonight be meant to also include any kind of contract amendments, additional design and architectural tasks, or is this simply to make the shift in directions?
There would be none due to the fact they haven't started.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from the commission? Any questions or comments from the public on this item? Okay, is there a motion or a lack of one? I'm waiting for your direction.
I don't want to force a motion and a vote if it doesn't have majority, consent, because I can go with it either place. I personally think that it'll get used better at King Griffin, but it's not a big enough fight for me to argue. If somebody's more strong about wanting it at the rec, then that's.
I can weigh in on my opinion because I would have a vote. I'm the one who fought so hard to get one of the splash pads at Kensall Park for the same reason that you stated earlier, that it's a walkable thing within the city of Lynn Haven. It's Kensall Park is on the west side of Highway 77. King Griffin Park, of course, is on the east side, which would provide another walkable park. Commissioner Friend and I have agreed to disagree many times about the splash pads. I agree with many of the things the city manager said about the upkeep of it with the clay, and also that the sports complex is ultimately a sports complex. It's a place that we're talking about increasing the number of ball fields, increasing the number of teams playing there. So I lean toward the King Griffin Park. We also have a more diverse community on the area around King Griffin. We have some lower income families who live very close to that park who would benefit by having a walkable park that those children could get to who may not have parents who can drive them someplace. So those are my thoughts, with all due respect to Commissioner Friend.
I would like to ask the city manager, and I guess there's a gentleman here that's building them or whatever you said?
No,
Oh.
our public utilities.
Oh, okay. Do you professionally feel that the cost of upkeep would be lower at one location over the other?
Greg, do you want to help with that? I think some of the things we spoke about, one of the biggest things would be a lot more employee involvement and trying to keep these things clean. But Greg and them was able to do a lot of research, so I'll let Greg.
This is new to all of us, until we actually get one on the ground and run it for a little while. The water chemistry aside, there is a difference. You're going to see a cost difference, but how much, we don't really have a feel for it. So, did that?
Could you speak to the water chemistry?
Yeah, the basic difference is the well water system, which is the interior part of the city, versus the county, which uses surface water. There's a difference in the two waters, pH being the primary one.
And the difference being beneficial or not beneficial?
The well water is beneficial. We have a higher pH on our well field system versus the surface water, which undergoes softening and everything else. The pH is lower on the county system.
Okay, thank you.
So your pumps and corrosion, things like that.
Thank you.
You know, my main goal is here is not put y'all in a difficult place. I'm just letting you know that I figured it would be best as me being city manager, bring to you, there may be more operating cost if it's placed in a particular area. And that was it.
And I can respect that. Mayor, may I make a motion?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we table this particular item until after the mid-year budget. I'm concerned about the mid-year budget to begin with, so, and then that would also give us an opportunity, maybe, I don't know when the end construction with Kensaw would be, but it'll give us an opportunity, and I just think that would be the thing to do, that we wait, and then before we start construction at the sports complex. That'll achieve two things for us. One, we can take a look at the mid-year budget and see where we are, because I'd remind the commission that during the budget, we thought that the splash pads were going to cost a certain amount, and they're not. They're costing a lot more. And the second thing would be give us opportunity to get back in the community and say, hey, we're thinking about putting it over here instead of over there. And then so I would just like to make a motion that we table this item until further notice.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor, I've got a couple of things. First, the question begs to be asked, how does that affect the contract? I mean, if we don't move forward with the contract that we've got in place, is that contract void on the second splash pad? And then when we go to renegotiate, does the contractor come back and say, now it's going to cost you even more? We've got them locked in at a price right now. What is that going to do to our contract? The second thing is, and this is not related to the motion completely, but I have to say that while I think King Griffin is where the splash pad needs to go, I'm not willing to make a motion or second a motion without Commissioner Friend's support. And the reason for that is when we decided on the splash pads, it was a compromise to have the second splash pad. And I know Commissioner Friend wanted it at the rec center, and we compromised and ended up with two of them and one of them at rec center. I don't think it's doing Commissioner Friend justice to move it without his support. So I would not be willing to make a motion or second, to have it moved.
Appreciate those comments. Any others?
I would just use the opportunity to say thank you very much. I appreciate that respect, and I'm just a voice of the community. I mean, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to say anything else. Just thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments? So there's been a motion to table it. So do you want to rescind that motion so that construction can go ahead based on those comments, or I'm not sure where to go here?
I'd like for my motion to stand that we just table it until we can gather additional information. If it's a if it's a concern, if the city manager can get with the construction, with the contractor and say, hey, if we put it off for 3 months, is it going to affect the contract? Then we can certainly put it back on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. White, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Friend?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes? Aye. Commissioner Russell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tender?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes. Okay, motion stands approved. Item number 15 is the adjournment of the meeting. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.